you get to like a new level of awareness, you unlock new insights, but you can't get to them without taking that action. All right guys, welcome to this video today. So I uploaded that perfectionism video last night. I'm recording this not even 24 hours after I uploaded that one. And even within that short space of time, there's been such a positive and encouraging response, I would say, to that video. And people have really shared some deep things about themselves on there, you know, like some really personal things. And this really shows me that I'm on the right track with that type of content. So I firstly just wanted to say thank you for that. I wanted to also elaborate on the perfectionism thing very quickly before we get into the main bulk of this video. And although I did focus on the editing of that video because it was what I was trying to tackle, I don't want people to think that I was making a big drama out of something that's just making a video. It's not a life or death situation. That was just the example I was given in that moment, but the perfectionism trait, you could call it, is something that has sort of infiltrated many areas of my life. And it felt like a real force. It felt almost like visceral within me, that there was almost as if it was being imposed on me from the outside. I know that sounds kind of crazy, maybe a bit schizophrenic almost, but that's sort of how it feels. And if you've dealt with anything like this, you'll understand what I mean. But what I realized in doing that video, just by dropping the expectations on myself, because when I made it, I just said to myself, I'm just going to make it. I hadn't planned to make it there and then. I'd recorded another video and I just made it straight afterwards, just kind of off the cuff. And so I think the reason for that was because I wasn't overthinking it too much. I was able to just drop it in one go. And that, since then, has had a bit of a domino effect on other internal things I feel like I'm struggling with or barriers I'm trying to overcome. And it showed me that they're not actually as scary as they seem, you know. And this is how beliefs work, because every time we have something we're trying to move towards, but every time we shy away from it, you know, if you want to say something and you don't say it because you don't want to rock the boat, if you want to put yourself out there but you hold back because you don't want to be judged, the negative belief gains this almost like, I was going to say strength, but I'll call it the perception of strength, because real strength would mean that it had a foundation, but I'll say perception of strength because it's not a real strength. And the reason I know that is because I was able to overcome that hurdle in one go. And if it was really strong and powerful, then I wouldn't have been able to do that. I'd have had to chip away at it over time. And this has made me really think, how many other things in your life are you holding yourself back from that could be toppled just as easily as that one? A weird little example I would like to offer about that is if you've seen the movie The Wizard of Oz. So it's a really old movie, and it's about these characters that basically go on this adventure to find this magician, this wizard. And they go through this huge kind of ordeal to get to him, and when they finally meet him, he's really he's kind of hostile towards them, and he just tells them to get lost and presents himself as this all grand, huge character, you know, like all powerful. The characters though discover that he's just being basically puppeteered by this frail old man who's kind of scared and doesn't really have anything to say. And that's a little bit how like our beliefs work. They appear as these massive scary demons, but when we face them, they just sort of fall away, and you recognize they didn't have a foundation to begin with. We all experience different kind of expressions of these types of beliefs, but I think what is underneath them all is that our self, without any kind of added fluff or any gimmicks and stuff, is not enough. And we need to add things onto it. So, you know, the rich man, firstly he wants a business, then he wants the watch, then he wants the designer clothes, then he wants the car, then the jet. Oh, the jet's not good enough anymore. I need the better jet, now I need the yacht, now I need the island, or something like that. And this just goes on and on. If you don't examine yourself, you just follow a belief system because it's unexamined and you just think it's true. I think people can get really lost within that, and that's what ultimately leads to things like, I think, like suicide and stuff. You know, if people really push a belief so far and it's unexamined, and unfortunately I think that the problem is that they were really kind of aiming for the wrong thing to begin with. They thought these things were going to bring them fulfillment and stuff, and they've exhausted it as far as they can go by acquiring as much as they can, and it's still really done nothing for them, and they don't really know where to go anymore. It's a double-edged sword, because for me, I think that my own physicality, for instance, with my martial arts skills and fitness and things like that, I would say that probably came from a sense of feeling inadequate. So I wanted to be impressive. I wanted to like build this character that could do these impressive things, and not just to a normal level. I wanted to be really high level, and I think that's driven me to do that, which is a great thing. And if you look at it on a bigger picture, you know, you could say that that's then led me to create this channel and then come to these realizations, these deeper realizations, and be able to share this stuff with you. So ultimately it all is working out for us if we see it that way. But you have to be really careful. And if you go about your life without ever realizing that's the driving force, you're never really going to be fulfilled. For me, I feel like meditation just became a necessity. I always wanted to kind of do things and create things and improve myself and stuff like that. And there's certain people you'll know, like most people in society don't want to do that. It's kind of, you're a bit weird when you want to do that. You're not really like everybody else. And what's going to happen is you're going to run into probably external resistance of people, you know, trying to push back against you. But you're also going to run into internal resistance as well, especially when you're trying to achieve something great, you know. You're going to run into these internal blocks. And for me, meditation became essential because I needed a way to kind of understand what that stuff was, especially if you start moving towards something. Because if you're just like everyone in society and you just get a job, you just get a family and you just kind of go with the norm, and there's nothing wrong with that, no judgment at all with that stuff, then you're never really faced with a challenge because everything's sort of familiar. There's nobody to kind of challenge you because you just fit in. But if you want to do something that's sort of out of the ordinary, then you're going to run into those challenges, I would say, quite soon. So as soon as you start to take action, there's going to be things in your way. Unless your programming from childhood and society was like absolutely stellar and perfect, which nobody's is, there's going to be some counter programming in there to what you want to achieve. So meditation for me has become something that allowed me to understand myself so much better. And it's a very delayed gratification activity. It's not something where you do it a couple of times and then you gain superpowers or something. It's a practice that very slowly over time changes your personality and you start to sort of realize things about yourself. I strongly believe that if I didn't have a decent meditation practice, that I wouldn't have really come to the realizations that I have about this sort of stuff and these understandings of myself, which then allows me to articulate and talk to you guys about them as well. I would have just taken the negative beliefs as absolute truth and then felt trapped by them. And then at that point you have two choices. You can just accept that or quit, really. It's kind of like, but meditation gives you it just gives you space and you can examine it and you ask yourself, is this true? And I think one of the biggest problems is that people believe that the mind has something valuable to tell them about their current situation. But the issue with that is that, like, you and the mind are solving for different problems. So your higher self, say it wants to move towards something and achieve a goal. Say it might be, yeah, I should put that video out, that'd be really good, that will help me grow and stuff. But then you get a thought like, no, don't say that because it might ruin your reputation or something, even though you have a strong desire to do that. If you leave that unexamined, you'd be like, yeah, actually that's a good idea, I shouldn't say that. But really you've cut off your higher intuition there because you listen to that thought. And the problem is that the mind isn't trying to get to the same place as you are. It wants to just keep you safe. It's an ancient survival mechanism. It recognizes progress forward as risk. Its whole goal is to keep you secure and safe and familiar. And it prioritizes that even over your own happiness. So it would rather you be miserable and secure than happy and progressing towards something but in a place that it perceives as risky. So a way to understand this might be to imagine two people that go into business together, right? One guy's dream is, he's always had this dream to make a massive sort of charitable contribution and help as many people in society as he can. And he partners with this other person whose goal is just to make as much money as he can at any cost. He doesn't care who he tramples over, how unmoral his actions are and things. But this guy that wants to make the money is going to feed suggestions to this altruistic businessman under the guise that they're going to help him with his goal, but really they're just designed to make him as much money as possible. So can you see how it's kind of a broken mechanism from the start? Because most things that the mind suggests to you, I'd say 99%, are all things where it thinks it's going to keep you safe, and it will shoot down any situation that it perceives as risky, even though you're not actually at risk, and it would lead to your progression. So again, I can't state the importance of developing self-awareness, because if you don't do that, you're just going to listen to everything your mind tells you and it will just keep you exactly where you are. And the longer that time goes by where you don't take action on things, there develops this kind of inertia that becomes harder to break. Think about the thoughts and the mind as it's almost like a parasite, and it's able to live, and its sustenance comes from your attention and your energy that you give to it. And because of that, it's willing to employ any methods, no matter how kind of diabolical, in order to get you to give it attention. So that's why it will use anything that's really close and personal to you to kind of hook you in. So have you noticed how the mind will take any side of an argument just in order to feed on your attention? So it will make you go on a diet because it's unhappy with your body, but then it'll feed you the thoughts to kind of go into the fridge and eat the chocolate cake. And then when you eat the chocolate cake, the next day it will beat the hell out of you and make you feel like shit, like you're just not somebody that can carry anything out and stuff like that. But you've got to think, like, who are these voices that are all kind of taking these other sides? It's almost like we have these multiple personalities within us. One says one thing, one says another, and then one beats up the other one for saying one thing, and then one congratulates the other. And it's in my opinion, this might sound a little bit extreme, but I think that we shouldn't really trust anything the mind has to say. The mind, I think, is to be used for decision making and planning for things, and then once you've used the mind in that way, there's not really much else you can do from that point. But the mind will certainly not accept that. It's a bit of a strange example, but I remember once being in a meditation and I got really, really still and was really kind of like witnessing how the mind would feed me these ideas, these different ideas during the meditation. And I kind of noticed how when it said one thing, it caused a bit of anxiety, then the other thing later was something positive, but then I was kind of, where did the anxiety go? What purpose did it serve and stuff? And after I, finished that meditation, I had somewhere to be, and I got ready and stuff and left the house. And then when I was kind of walking towards there, I had to be there at a certain time as well. And I noticed these thoughts that were coming to me, kind of saying that, oh, what if like something happens? What if you don't get there on time? What if there's loads of traffic and you don't get there? That's a perfect example of how the mind doesn't really have anything sort of useful to tell you, because I'd already left the house. I'd done everything I could, I'd gotten myself ready at a certain time and I'd left with enough time to get there. But that wasn't enough for the mind. It wanted to continue to commentate on the journey when I was going there. There was nothing it had to say was going to change what time I got there. So it was useless at that point. That's kind of what I mean by this. And if something negative happens, that thing happened, right? It just happened. It has happened. It's a fact. But the mind is not satisfied with that result. It always likes to say what it thinks about it. Yeah, like this person did this and they disrespected you, like they don't respect you because of this. And it's like, none of these thoughts change the fact of what happened. It's kind of like when people complain about traffic. They go to like a red light and then they start whining about how there's so much traffic. You're at the red light. No thoughts or no complaining that you say is going to change the fact this light is now red for this certain time until you can go. And I just think it's crazy. It's like insanity, really. It does nothing for us. And I think the work is to recognise we have this within us, and it's constantly speaking to us. Maybe to you this doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you really start to investigate this, I think you'll discover just what an enormous role this is actually playing in your life. I don't want you to think that when I say the mind is useless, that you shouldn't use it for its purpose, but it's like the mind's become greedy with its role. It has a role, but it wants more duties. It wants to always, like, imagine somebody kind of pushing in like a line or something when you're waiting. It always wants to get in front and always have its say. It's just like a whining child, really. It just always has to say something to you, always has to have a comeback. It's kind of a little bit like that. If you think about how that happens in so many areas of our lives, like how is this playing out in huge areas of things we really want to go towards, and we're listening to these thoughts in our minds that are really negative and that are not conducive to us achieving what we want. The mind will often feed you like a negative outcome for something, but if you do manage to overcome that and push past it, it often turns out to be really great anyway. So imagine if, say, an artist desires to do this painting, but as he starts to do it, he will doubt himself. He'll think the painting won't be any good. He'll judge himself and stuff like that. And then as he starts to do this, it's going to affect his productivity in his work. And then if he keeps listening to that mind, he might just eventually throw the painting away and think it's absolute trash. That reminds me actually of the writer Stephen King, actually, super prolific writer who's had loads of his works made into films. He suffered with this loads, and I think it was his book Carrie, which is one of his most famous works. He actually threw it away, and his wife retrieved it from the trash and was like, you need to publish this. And that was, so like, even somebody at that level, like, is going through this stuff. Going back to the artist analogy again, if he does manage to overcome this and push forward into it, he'll probably find that people absolutely love the work. And it takes pushing past those blocks in order to get to that. If you do manage to overcome these things, which is what I feel that I tackled in my own small way with making that video in the way I did before, you get to like a new level of awareness. You unlock new insights, but you can't get to them without taking that action. So when you do that, you see the situation from a new light and you see the kind of holes in the belief system. And I think the mind, the reason why it does this really ultimately is it's trying to build a model of security in a world that isn't secure. There's no inherent security in this world. Like, anything can happen. You know, I could walk out in the road and get mowed down by a bus tomorrow, and nothing that the mind can feed me to feel secure is going to change that fact. But it like does its best. It's almost kind of sad in a way. It's like trying to develop this thing that it's never going to develop. It's like a singer that's tone deaf trying to make it on the stage. It's just never going to happen. It's got a broken foundation in a way. We do have an influence on our reality, absolutely, through our beliefs and things like that. But you know, in after a football game or something where the commentators talk about the match, the way we listen to our mind and think that it has something important to tell us is kind of as if the comments that those like pundits give about the game that just happened is going to change the result of the game. If you think about it, that's how it is, because what has happened, and the mind is only going to is going to give you definitions and models of reality to try to make sense of that, but it's not going to change the fact. But with our mind, we just believe it is. That's the biggest problem, and it's like an illusion. When I give that football example and I say, oh yeah, you know, like what the commentators say afterwards changes the outcome of the game, is ridiculous. But that's what we're doing with the mind. So I hope that helps you to see how its way of operating is just very flawed. This is going to be a theme, I think, of these types of videos, because it's one of the cornerstones of developing any level of awareness and insight into this stuff. Without it, I think you're just hopeless, unless you're some kind of guru. You're like a born yogi or something like that. It's really important. So hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and please leave a comment below with your thoughts on the video, and I'll see you next time.